So my question is, what would it take for you in your community to attempt this reach out to find a community of with political difference where you start something on your own?
What would it take for us to initiate something like what you did?
Exactly. What would it take for you to do it?
Great question. Anybody want to respond? Stuart?
That is a great question, and I'd like to respond because it's relevant in a couple ways. In our group, the Indivisible group that I have here in the South Valley, we've had these conversations, and I've had conversations with other people. And I personally am reaching out. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, one of my running buddies who voted for Trump, he and I have we have a dialogue, and we talked while we ran. We got together for coffee a few weeks ago for a couple of hours. We want to do it again. The challenge, though, is when I bring this up, people become so defensive, and they say, I don't even want to talk with them. And it's become such a polarized kind of situation. So to answer your question, what it would take, I feel it would take some kind of awareness that we have to start doing that in order to make any progress. And how do you break down that mentality that I won't talk to them if they're a Trump supporter? So I'm not answering your question what it would take. I know specifically, giving you more of the resistance that I've had, but I think it's going to take somehow to let people know that it's almost an either or. Either we start doing that and accepting the fact that we need to talk with one another, or we accept the fact that we're going to continue to be polarized and it's going to take some kind of devastating event to bring us together.
Thank you, Stuart. Great answer. Who else would like to reply to that question?
I'll give it a try. I say that the people who voted for Trump are just symbolic of a root cause of lots of problems we have in our country. And that if we could together bring people together to focus on the problems that encouraged people to vote for Trump, to feel that they are heard and acknowledged, it would help a lot. I know I've talked to some legal immigrants, and they seem to be some of the ones that voted for Trump because they feel that the immigration problem they responded to fairly and legally, while others are getting a free pass. So that's kind of one group of people that I've talked to. But I also think that to bring any kind of a group together, we have to be willing to move out, reach out, and initiate and be interested enough to do it. And we find that in our Jewish-Palestinian dialogue circles. A lot of the people in the group say, oh, we need to have some more new Palestinians in the group. And we say, well, get out there and meet them. You know, they're our neighbors. They have delis. They're in the neighborhood. They're wonderful people. Just go invite them. And it's kind of like you have to make the decision that if you really want it to happen, the people are out there. And I think we just have to desire it enough to go for it and say, I'd really love to sit down and talk to you, and how about it?
Thank you, Libby. Wendy.
I'm thinking about persistence, and Ari, I'm thinking about the time that we were with our fundamentalist neighbors, and we had a relationship with them, but they invited us to a Bible study group, and at that time there was the leader of the group was saying some really anti-Muslim things, and we just said, we're not going to do this anymore, and we left. And I'm just wondering if we had persisted and if we had been continuing with the group, even though we found what they had to say was abhorrent, maybe there could have been some some change within all of us. So I am thinking about not splitting like, I can't deal with this, but keep on dialoguing and finding those ways to connect.
Maybe it's time for us to invite them over again for tea.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a personal answer, Paula, to your question. For me, what it would take is some sort of interchange. I was very impressed with what you said earlier about how you had to change within yourself, that you had to have the willingness for your heart to open and for there to be understanding and something in you to change rather than looking at something in them to change.
Correct.
I feel like personally in my life, I've made commitments to a number of different communities, and it's keeping me very busy, and I'm very, I feel very sort of at home and comfortable in that world. And if I were going to do something like what you guys did, I'd have to start with a change in myself and say, okay, I'm going to have to be willing to put myself on the line a little bit here and open my heart a little beyond what I'm already doing. So that's what it would take for me. Stuart.
If I may, I just thought of another question answer to the question that you posed to us. And that is, when I think about interacting with people who have opposing views or positions, whether it be politically or whatever, especially right now, what I'm finding is that my thinking is that there isn't one answer. And so when we're giving answers, my feeling is that we're dealing with a group who we say are Trump supporters or conservatives or whoever we want. However, there are multiple subgroups to that. In other words, we have some people who voted for Trump because they hated Hillary. And in fact, the friend I was alluding to that I spoke with yesterday, he's more of a middle conservative than he is a far right wing, but he couldn't stand the fact of what he felt Hillary stood for. So it's not that I love Trump. I have another very good friend, very old friend back from school days, Jewish lawyer, so on and so forth, staunch conservative. We've gotten into an email exchange debating these things and come to the conclusion that we're not as far apart as we might have thought. Mm-hmm. However, he hates some of the liberal kinds of things that he hears and sees. He said that Trump was number 15 or 16, however many there were on the list of Republican candidates, for him. But that's who won it. He's not a big fan. However, he likes some of the results he gets. So you have some people who didn't like Hillary, some people who maybe loved Trump, wanted things broken and start over. And then there's another group, I think, and it's somewhat of the group, Paul, that you were talking about, and that is people who are almost, at least from my vantage point, you know better than we do, brainwashed. It's almost like back in the days, and you look at a Jim Jones kind of character, if you're only getting fed certain things, you ultimately are almost brainwashed to believe what you're hearing, Fox News or whatever. And then those are just sort of three high-level categories, and you could probably break it down further. But my concern is that if we think of approaching how do we as one way, we're going to be missing because there are multiple kinds of individuals who are connected with the Trump kind of position.
So your response is really to her question is to pay attention to the individual you're approaching.
Yes.
Let's see, who hasn't answered yet? I don't think you've answered yet, Karuna, have you? And I want to give you a chance to unmute yourself there. There you go.
Well, I've been in a number of gatherings. For example, one last week, a clinical professional gathering where the issue, it was focused on multicultural issues, speaking across the race divide. And my experience in a gathering, again, of fairly like-minded people, was there were some major breakdowns where there were insensitivities, let's say, around the meaning of white privilege. And what I saw, as I was speaking to some of the African American people afterwards, one African American woman in the group was saying, I want to go find Trump supporters to go to communicate with, like Paula and Sharon are doing. And I spoke to her afterwards and I said, there are people here who need this dialogue. So I'm not thinking so much of finding these far off, different folks to communicate with. There's enough challenge communicating among folks that are more like-minded, where people are missing, and can't quite see how they're coming across or what's needed by somebody who's different. So for myself personally, I take my challenge as helping the communication where the breakdowns are within what would otherwise be similar voting blocks, but still there's difficulty in hearing one another or appreciating each other's differences. So that's where I'm holding my challenge.
Thank you, Karuna. Yeah.